This analysis will explore how countries are able to facilitate peace and justice when facing histories that often have involved quite brutal ethnic conflicts. Through this focus, we will attempt to unearth a policy solution that can be used by nations in this globalized age to promote a sense of national justice and cohesiveness. To do so, we'll be focusing on one case study, exploring how Ireland has attempted to rebuild following decades of violent unrest between overwhelmingly Roman Catholic nationalists in favour of Irish independence and Protestant Unionists who were committed to the traditional British monarchy. The proposal put forward later in this presentation will echo the theoretical perspective found in Beveridge's 2012 paper, Lynch's 2018 paper, and Olson's 2010 study, that solutions to ethnic violence should be 1. Self-limiting in scope, to change only that which can be changed, 2. Focused on tangible outcomes, and 3. Produce an agreed-upon historical narrative. The solution will attempt to chart a path forward for societies with scarred histories, in this case, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, who are looking to mark a clean break between their scarred past and a hopeful future. Fundamentally, it will be tailored around the most tangible outcomes it can produce for the largest number of affected individuals. For example, to what extent can it improve social and political conditions, implement personal redress for past atrocities, and facilitate performative effects that help to enact a break with the past? The time popularly known as the Troubles in Irish history produced a great deal of violence, a total of over 30,000 injuries and 3,700 deaths between 1968 and 1998. The UK sought to combat this problem with the 1998 Belfast Agreement, also known as the Good Friday Agreement, which sought to merge the political arms of the two warring ethnic groups into a power-sharing government that would, allegedly, enable a transition from terrorism to democracy. The agreement did mandate mass disarmament, reassign policy authority, and lay the groundwork for enhanced bilateral cooperation. However, it resoundingly failed to change the reality on the ground. Although the agreement ended decades of political stalemate and immediately brought about a sharp reduction in violence, today the region remains mired in ongoing sectarian tensions and street violence. Following the implementation of the Belfast Agreement in December 1999, the intended narrative of UK goodwill really failed to take root. Hostilities remained throughout the early 2000s as waves of rioting, looting, and targeted shootings led to a post-agreement peak of 124 paramilitary-connected deaths in 2001-2002. And although the number of political deaths has dropped significantly from the high of 470 experienced in 1972, the tally continues to top 100 deaths per year today. In a contemporary sense, this violence of the past has re-emerged in the form of stark religious, ethnic, and political divisions pervading the country's social landscape. Catholic and Protestant segregation has grown to dominate the country's education system. So behind the facade generated by this precipitous drop in death tolls, Northern Ireland remains well short of peace. In 2016, more than 93% of Northern Irish children attended segregated primary and secondary schools, defined as those that overwhelmingly enrolled students from either a Catholic or a Protestant background. This structure embeds a daily reminder of division during the formative years of adolescence, limiting interpersonal development and creating an us versus them mentality that continues into and grows throughout young adulthood. It also solidifies an economic gap between the far wealthier Catholic minority in Ireland, forcing the state to spend over $2.7 billion to administer and regulate two parallel systems of education. Although conflict may be less tangible today in Northern Ireland, these endemic social divisions reveal an ethnic gap that is still alive and well in the country. Moving on to a solution for this, what exactly can we do about it? It is crucial that any proposed change promotes reform within both the legal sector and within Irish national discourse. First, change must confront the institutions and power bodies of Irish law. Remarkably, Northern Ireland has remained under the legal tradition of the Westminster system, both before and after the transition. The institutions tasked with upholding national justice have sought to absolve and distance themselves from the atrocities of the Troubles, while maintaining an ongoing reliance on pre-transition legal forms, norms, and institutions, ultimately a legal structure that provided the bedrock for the violence, conflict, and abuse that spread throughout the late 20th century. Our solution would explicitly commit to a criminal justice review, a reform of policing practices, a new mechanism for enforcing rights and establishing a Bill of Rights, broad judicial reform to bring in new equality legislation, as well as distinct measures focusing on incarceration practice, current prisoners, and victims of crime. However, these changes must also not be restricted in their scope. For example, immediately following the conflict, a report on a so-called new beginning for Northern Irish policing explicitly aimed to engineer good policing, rather than actually examining what constituted good police. In doing so, the report dedicated 57 pages to policing logistics and only 3 to the culture, ethos, and symbols of the institution, an error whose consequences continue to play out today. Our proposal is quite clear in including an explicit condemnation of the legal system's past failings. In order to regain trust among the public and both ethnic minorities, legal institutions must openly acknowledge their past failures. It must also be said that this change would require a significant amount of political capital and social goodwill to be implemented and enforced. Secondly, any proposal for change must end the sense of unfinished business that dominates Irish discourse and continues to encourage societal division today. The strong institutional reluctance to confront their own legacies of violence has created a historical vacuum in Northern Ireland. There remains no singular, unifying consensus as to what the pre-transition conflict exactly was about or what specifically caused it. Without a responsible and far-reaching institutional actor putting its hand up to recognise fault, the warring quasi-ethnic groups in the country have continued to wage their own conflict about the conflict. As all involved parties retain something to lose, specific groups are hesitant to commit themselves to accusations of individual culpability. And further, various institutions are unable to plot a meaningful path forward, as their efforts to mould a suitable reform process simply act as surrogate continuations of the conflict itself. Indeed, the inability of Northern Irish education to legislate itself out of religious segregation serves as something of a testament to this discursive stalemate. Our proposal would aim to create a national Truth and Reconciliation Commission that would spread a single definitive truth on the nature of the conflict and the atrocities committed by both sides. With this singular narrative in hand, the warring Protestant and Catholic sides would ideally lose their motivation to bicker on all sides of the conflict, and perhaps even work towards a new peace in Ireland. The problem of Irish sectarianism vividly highlights the importance of considering cultural factors when drafting solutions that affect multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multi-class groups of people. In particular, they inform 3 key areas of a solution to the problems of globalization. Firstly, cultural factors often influence and inform the emotional, familial, and political motivations behind the various stakeholders involved in an issue. Secondly, Studying the cultural history of an issue will often illuminate the grievances, narratives, and mythologies that affect contemporary issues. And finally, solutions that incorporate cultural elements will allow for long-term compliance by focusing on changes that can be enforced as social or familial norms. More broadly, this problem highlights what role professionals should seek to play in our highly globalized world. Fundamentally, they must attempt to understand the unique factors that motivate different cultures of people and present solutions that acknowledge the different visions of reality held by different cultures. Only this sort of approach, allowing for tailored solutions, is one that will actually be followed by such disparate cultural groups in a globalized world.